Have you ever had that feeling? You know, that feeling like the story you're hearing, the official version of things, just it doesn't quite add up. Like maybe something else is going on, something bigger.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling that there's a whole other layer of reality we're not being shown.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the space where this theory we're diving into today lives. It's called Project Bluebeam, and it really leans into that sense of unease.
It's definitely one of the more out there theories out there, but that's part of what makes it so fascinating to explore.
Okay, so let's set the stage. What is Project Bluebeam at its core?
Well, in a nutshell, it alleges that powerful forces we're talking, like global elites, organizations like NASA and the UN, are planning to orchestrate this huge, elaborate hoax.
A hoax? Like what kind of hoax are we talking about here?
A couple of different versions, actually. One version is that they'll stage a fake alien invasion.
Whoa, like a full-blown spaceships in the sky, Independence Day type situation.
Exactly. The other version is that they'll manipulate global religious events, creating a kind of mass religious experience.
And the goal of all this? Like, why would they go through all this trouble to pull off something so massive?
The theory says it's all about control. The ultimate goal is to establish a totalitarian new world order.
The New World Order. That's a phrase you hear a lot in conspiracy theory circles.
Right. And in this context, it basically means a one-world government controlled by a select few with everyone else under their thumb.
And how would this fake alien invasion or this manipulated religious event lead to that?
The idea is that they'll use these events to create a climate of fear and chaos. Then they'll step in, offering solutions in the form of a single, unified global government.
So people would be so scared and desperate that they'd willingly give up their freedoms for the promise of safety and security.
Exactly. It's a pretty bleak picture, but that's the core of the theory.
It definitely plays on some deep-seated fears about power and control. So where does this whole idea of Project Bluebeam come from? Who first came up with this theory?
Well, the origins of this theory can be traced back to a Canadian investigative journalist and conspiracy theorist named Serge Monast.
Serge Monast. I've heard that name before, but I'm not familiar with his work.
Yeah, he was a pretty prolific figure in the conspiracy theory world back in the 1990s.
Oh.
He really brought Project Bluebeam into the public consciousness through his book and through public speeches he gave.
What was it that led him to believe in this theory? Like, what kind of evidence did he present?
He claimed that governments, specifically NASA and the UN, were secretly developing this elaborate four-step plan to manipulate the masses.
4 steps. So it wasn't just one big event. This was a whole multi-stage process.
Right, and each stage was designed to build on the last, ultimately leading to the establishment of this new world order.
And what happened to this Serge Monast? Is he still around, continuing to investigate this theory?
Sadly, no. He died pretty suddenly in 1996 from a heart attack.
A heart attack. At what age?
He was only 51.
That's young. And I imagine his sudden death only fueled the suspicions of his followers.
Oh, absolutely. Many of them believed that he was silenced.
Silenced? You mean like he was killed because he was getting too close to the truth?
That's the idea. They believed that powerful forces wanted to shut him up to prevent him from exposing their plans.
That definitely adds an extra layer of intrigue to this whole thing. So, to dive into this theory, we're going to follow Monast's 4-step plan. We'll break down each of these alleged stages, look at the supposed goals behind them, and explore the evidence, if any, that exists to support them. We'll also, of course, take a critical look at the counter-arguments, the arguments against this theory.
Sounds good to me. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with stage 1. What did Monast believe was the first step in this grand plan to manipulate the world?
According to him, stage 1 involves the creation and strategic placement of fake archaeological discoveries.
Fake archaeological discoveries. What do you mean by that?
It means that they'd plant these fake artifacts, things that look like ancient relics, but are actually cleverly crafted forgeries.
Wow. And the purpose of these fakes would be?
Well, the theory says the fakes would be designed to contradict and undermine the core beliefs of major religions.
So, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, you name it.
Exactly. These discoveries would challenge the historical narrative and religious texts, sowing doubt and confusion among believers.
That's a pretty bold move right out of the gate, to go after people's religious beliefs, the very foundation of their faith.
Right, and they'd use some seriously advanced tech to make these fakes seem convincing.
Like, what kind of tech are we talking about here?
Well, nobody knows for sure, but we're probably talking about technology we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah.
It would have to be something capable of replicating ancient materials and craftsmanship perfectly. And it's not just about making these fakes, it's also about how they'd be revealed to the world.
How so?
Well, these artifacts wouldn't just be found in some routine dig, they would be discovered through earthquakes.
Earthquakes, you mean like natural disasters?
The theories suggest that these earthquakes could actually be artificially induced, triggered by secret technology.
So they'd cause these earthquakes in specific locations to unearth these fake artifacts, making it seem like they were genuine discoveries.
Precisely. And then these discoveries would be widely publicized, creating a global sensation and causing people to question everything they thought they knew about history and religion. This, according to the theory, would lead to a global crisis of faith, making people more receptive to a new, unified, and ultimately controlled belief system.
So stage one is all about shaking the foundations of belief systems, paving the way for something new to take their place. Okay, so on to stage two. What happens after they've supposedly sown doubt about established religions?
Stage 2 is where things get really wild. This is the stage that often gets the most attention because it's so visually spectacular. We're talking about the Great Holographic Show.
The Great Holographic Show, that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It definitely does. The idea is that they would use advanced holographic technology to project massive images into the sky, visible to everyone on Earth.
Whoa, like the entire sky would become a screen.
Pretty much. These holograms would be incredibly realistic, indistinguishable from real objects. They would be three-dimensional, moving, and maybe even interactive.
So what kind of images are we talking about here? What would they project into the sky?
The theory suggests a few different possibilities. One is the appearance of a messiah figure.
Like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, depending on the region and the target audience.
Exactly. This figure would appear in the sky, delivering messages, performing miracles, essentially reinforcing the idea that a new divine being has arrived.
Okay, so a fake messiah, that's definitely going to get people's attention.
Another possibility is a massive UFO display.
Like a full-blown alien invasion.
It could be presented that way, or maybe more like a grand arrival of benevolent extraterrestrials.
Either way, that's going to be a pretty convincing argument for a one-world government if we think we need to unite against a common enemy from outer space.
Exactly. The idea is to create a shared global experience, something that transcends national boundaries and unites everyone in fear or awe. It wouldn't just be visual either. They'd use other technologies too, like electromagnetic waves, to create what people would perceive as voices in their heads.
Like telepathy.
Exactly. People would think they're hearing the voice of God, or the aliens, or whoever they're trying to convince us of.
And of course, no global spectacle would be complete without some special effects.
Right. The theory claims they'd use weather control technology, maybe even HARP, to create dramatic atmospheric effects, further enhancing the illusion.
So they could create artificial storms, auroras, maybe even fake eclipses, whatever it takes to really sell the show.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine seeing all of this happening in the sky, hearing voices in your head, and experiencing these unusual weather patterns. It would be pretty overwhelming.
So, to recap, stage two is all about creating a global spectacle using holographic technology, telepathic communication, and weather control. And the goal of all this is to convince people that a new god or new alien overlords have arrived. This would lead to the abandonment of existing faiths and the adoption of a single global religion, perfectly setting the stage for the New World Order.
Okay, on to stage 3. What's next in this alleged plan for global domination?
Stage three gets a bit more insidious. This is where the focus shifts to direct mind control.
Mind control, like actual mind control, not just influencing people's beliefs through holograms and fake voices.
Yeah, the theory suggests that they'd use some kind of advanced technology to directly manipulate people's thoughts and emotions.
That's terrifying. What kind of technology are we talking about? How would they even do that?
The details are pretty vague.
Yeah.
The most common suggestion is some sort of low-frequency radio wave system. They believe these waves can influence brain activity and essentially implant thoughts and emotions directly into people's minds. So you wouldn't even hear a voice, you'd just have thoughts popping into your head that you believe are your own.
Exactly. It would be like subliminal messaging on steroids. They could make you believe anything they wanted. They could simulate conversations with divine beings or aliens, reinforcing the narrative they've established in the previous stages.
So if you are already primed to believe in a new god or alien overlords because of the holographic show, this technology would just seal the deal, making you a true believer with no doubts whatsoever.
Right, and it wouldn't stop there. They could use this technology to quell dissent, to eliminate critical thinking,
Yeah.
to basically turn everyone into obedient followers.
It's like something straight out of a dystopian nightmare. And to think, Monis even suggested that HARP could play a role in this mind control scheme.
Right. He believed that HARP could be used to amplify these low-frequency signals or create the right atmospheric conditions for them to be effective.
So stage 3 takes the manipulation to a whole new level, going from influencing beliefs to outright controlling people's thoughts and actions. Okay, so the final stage, stage 4. What's the grand finale of this alleged plot?
This is where things get really apocalyptic. Stage 4 involves the creation of fake global catastrophes and a staged alien invasion. The idea is to ratchet up the fear and chaos to a fever pitch.
So we're talking about like fake terrorist attacks or artificially created natural disasters.
Exactly. Think about it. They could stage a nuclear attack and blame it on terrorists, or create a massive earthquake that devastates a major city.
And all of this would be blamed on enemies, real or imagined, to further justify the need for a one-world government.
And then to top it all off, they would stage an alien invasion.
So all those UFO sightings we've been hearing about lately, that's just the prelude to the main event.
That's what the theory suggests. These staged attacks, combined with the mind control already in place, would create a global panic, a sense that humanity is on the brink of annihilation.
And then, just when all hope seems lost, the New World Order steps in to save the day.
They'll offer us protection, but at a cost. Our freedom, our individuality, our sovereignty.
So to recap, Project Bluebeam, as described by Serge Monist, is a 4-stage plan involving fake archaeological discoveries, a holographic show, mind control, and staged catastrophes. The ultimate goal is to create a one-world government ruled by a select few.
Pretty chilling scenario.
Okay, so we've laid out the theory. Now let's look at some of the arguments for and against it. What are some of the things that make people believe this theory could actually be true?
Well, one thing that fuels the belief is the increasing acknowledgement of UFOs by governments, especially the U.S. government, which has recently released some pretty compelling footage of unexplained aerial phenomena.
All right, and some people see this as a sign that they're slowly preparing us for some kind of big reveal, maybe even a staged alien invasion.
Another thing that lends some credence to the theory is the existence of advanced holographic technology. We've already seen what's possible with things like the Tupac hologram at Coachella.
Right, if we can do that now, imagine what will be possible in a few years.
Exactly. And then there's HARP. We know that it can influence weather patterns, and some people believe it could potentially be used to trigger earthquakes and other natural disasters.
So if they can control the weather and cause earthquakes, maybe the staged catastrophes aren't so far-fetched after all.
Right, and all of those things combined create a sense that maybe, just maybe, this theory isn't as crazy as it sounds.
Okay, so those are some of the arguments in favor of the theory. Now, let's flip the script. What are some of the biggest criticisms and counter-arguments against Project Bluebeam?
Well, the biggest one is the lack of solid evidence. Serge Monist made a lot of claims, but he never produced any concrete proof to back them up.
Right, there are no leaked documents, no whistleblowers, no smoking gun that proves this plan is actually in motion.
And even if they could pull off something like this, think about the logistics involved. We're talking about a global conspiracy involving thousands, maybe even millions of people.
Right, and you'd think someone would have talked by now.
Exactly. It's hard to keep a secret that big, especially when it involves such advanced technology and complex coordination.
And then there's the question of why. Governments already have plenty of ways to control people. Why go through all this trouble to stage something so elaborate and risky?
Right. They could just use traditional propaganda, media manipulation, censorship, surveillance, all the tools they already have at their disposal. A holographic show and fake alien invasion seem like overkill.
So while the theory is definitely intriguing and some of the pieces seem to fit together, there are also some major holes in the logic.
And that's important to keep in mind. We should always approach these kinds of theories with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to touch on how this theory connects to some of the events we've seen in the world recently. Because, sometimes it feels like real life is starting to resemble a conspiracy theory. What are some of the events that people have linked to Project Bluebeam?
Well, the most obvious one is the whole UFO phenomenon. All those recent reports and videos of UAPs, it's hard to ignore.
Right, and some people believe those sightings are either part of the plan or a deliberate attempt to desensitize us to the idea of aliens, so we're not so shocked when the invasion happens.
Another thing that people have pointed to is the COVID-19 pandemic.
What, like the pandemic was part of Project Bluebeam?
Not necessarily the pandemic itself,
Yeah.
but the response to it. All those lockdowns, restrictions, mandates, it kind of gave a glimpse of what a world under a one-world government might look like.
Right. A world where our freedoms are restricted in the name of safety and security.
Exactly. And for some people, that experience reinforced their belief that something bigger is going on, that we're being slowly conditioned to accept a loss of freedom.
It's definitely a bit unsettling to think about. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Project Bluebeam, let's try to distill some key takeaways. We've explored this complex and, let's face it, kind of out there theory.
We've seen how it plays on our fears, our anxieties about the future, and our distrust of those in power.
And while there's no solid evidence to prove it's true, it does raise some interesting questions about the nature of reality, the power of technology, and the potential for manipulation on a global scale.
It also reminds us to be critical thinkers, to question everything we see and hear, and to be wary of those who claim to have all the answers.
So as we leave you to ponder all of this, we have one final question for you. What do you believe? Is Project Bluebeam just a product of overactive imaginations, or is it something more?
And if it is something more, what does that mean for us? What does it mean for the future of humanity?
We'll leave you to grapple with those questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning.